Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion on Air podcast. This podcast is a program of the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges Diversity Matters Initiative. The podcast explores various issues related to diversity and inclusion in the veterinary profession and provides the AAVMC an opportunity to offer ongoing diversity programming to our member institutions as well as all veterinary professionals. My name is Dr. Lisa Greenhill, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer of the AAVMC. So we are a bit late, I think 5 days late in celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month here in the States this year. But that's because my guests, my three guests today are super VIPs with crazy schedules, and it took several months for us to pull this show together. So I'm very excited to have my guest today. According to the Census Bureau, each year Americans observe National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of Americans whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. Hispanic, Latinx, and Latine populations are among the fastest growing in the US and certainly also among the most diverse. As an ethnicity, kind of an umbrella ethnicity, Hispanics can be any race, they can practice any religion, they can come from a variety of backgrounds, and the Latin diaspora is everywhere. Right. So today, my three guests are three deans, two of whom are the first Hispanic Latin American deans at veterinary colleges in the US. So I am very delighted to welcome to the show Dr. Carmen Fuentealba of Long Island University, Dr. Carlos Risco of Oklahoma State University, and Dr. Francisco Suarez of UNAM. Welcome to the show, each of you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, as is our custom on the show, I have my guests tell us a bit about yourselves, themselves. And so today we're going to start with Carmen. If you could tell us a bit about yourself and your veterinary origin story.
Sure. So thank you for inviting me. We know each other for many, many years, and it's always good talking with you. And having Francisco and Carlos is a treat because, as you said, it's difficult for us to get together. So I'm originally from Chile. That's where I did my DVM degree. And then I went to Texas. Well, first I did my PhD at Liverpool in England, and then Texas A&M for the residency program in pathology. And I started my academic journey in Atlantic Veterinary College in Canada, Prince Edward Island. And I have been founding faculty and now founding dean at Long Island University. This is my third new veterinary school. So pathologist by training and very interested in veterinary education.
Great, thank you. So why don't we have Francisco? Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be with you and also with Carmen and Carlos, people that we get together very often in different circumstances, especially with Carmen. And about my background as a vet, I get my BBM degree from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And then I also did a master's degree in the same university in microbiology. Then I started working as an associate professor part-time at the University of Mexico, and also full-time at the Institute of Research, Animal Research Institute in Mexico City. Then I moved into the United States to Colorado State University and worked in my PhD also with the mycobacteria and Mannheimia at that time. And then I came back to Mexico. I started working again at the university, this time at the university in Monterrey, in Nuevo León, in the state of Nuevo León, in the north part of the country. And then they asked me to come down to Mexico City to my university where I graduate. And I started working in different, always in the microbiology field, but also as Associate Dean of Research, Associate Dean of Graduate School, and now I am in my second period as a dean. And in Mexico, at the university, there are rules that you can be dean at one of the schools, two periods of 4 times each. Then I am in second period. And I have enjoyed this position very, very much. I think in my family background, my grandfather was before the revolution of Mexico that has happened many, many years ago. He was administrator of haciendas, large haciendas before they were divided. And then there was a lot of history and a lot of things in my family also related with animals and animal production especially. And I say again, very nice, very glad to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. And yeah, I want to hear more about that history at some point. So we might get it. We're going to come back to that. So now we're going to go to Dr. Carlos Risco.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to join my distinguished colleagues. So as far as my origin, both in veterinary medicine, so I was born in Cuba. I was 6 years old when I emigrated to the United States with my family, with my three sisters, 2 brothers. And we spent a very short time in Miami. And then we moved to Puerto Rico. And I lived in Puerto Rico until I was about 12 years old. And during that time, I had a wonderful experience I was surrounded with a variety of animals, from dogs, cattle, horses, and a veterinarian that took this 9-year-old, 10-year-old around. He worked for USDA, and I think that's what started my affinity to the veterinary profession, of veterinary medicine. I always had an interest in science and medicine that was nurtured by my father, who was a physician. When I was 12 years old, we moved back to the United States, Trotwood, Ohio, outside of Dayton, Ohio, where I had an opportunity to be an FFA, 4-H, and again, connected with veterinarians. I finished my high school in St. Petersburg, Florida, the Tampa Bay area. And then I enrolled at University of Florida, did my undergraduate there, received my DVM degree from the University of Florida, the first class, the chartered class. I practiced veterinary medicine, large animal medicine, particularly dairy veterinary medicine in Southern California in the Chino Valley. And I became boarded in theriogenology, and then an opportunity, a faculty position came available at Florida. I joined. I was there for 27 years, assistant, associate, department head, large animal clinical sciences. And I've been in this role as dean here at Oklahoma State for the last 4.5 years.
4.5 years has flown by. I remember when you were boy, like, of course the pandemic has been in there, and I told everybody, I'm like, pandemic time is different, right? So it seems much longer. So my first question to each of you really has to do with kind of identity language, right? And so of course, in the US, we have National Hispanic Heritage Month, but certainly in the last probably decade to 15 years or so, we've seen a lot of evolution and change in the way that Hispanics and Latin Americans identify. And so two of the kind of more often used terms now are LatinX, which kind of eliminates the gendered aspect of Spanish. And then now we're kind of on the front end of seeing Latine, which kind of brings back a bit of gender, but is a little bit different. So I'm really curious how you all think about this language and how do you identify? Because I also know that a lot of folks tend to also identify by country culture piece. And so, so I'm really interested in hearing some of your thoughts on this identity language. Why don't we start with you, Carlos?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, my understanding of the exchange of these two words, the Hispanic, denotes more of the Spanish language, and it may be more from what I would say European origin, from Spain. Hispanicus, I believe, is the origin of the word. But I identify as a Latino. I'm a male that comes from Latin America, was born in Latin America, in my case, Cuba, whose native language is Spanish, because I think that the Latino, Latina, that word really, as I understand it, as I try to understand the difference between these two words, is more of your origin, more of a territorial. So in my case, Latin America, specifically Cuba, as Latino.
Carmen, your thoughts, and then Francisco.
Yeah, it is very confusing. And so, you know, I tend to go with Hispanic. And the main reason is because I am from Chile, South America, we're quite isolated. And so, you know, we do identify being Latin American, and that will include, you know, Brazil. I think that there is a confusion about LatinX, whether, you know, Spain is included and Portugal is included. So then all of a sudden, you know, you want to be inclusive and you start excluding people. So I respond to either, you know, Hispanic, Latinx, Latina, and it's just a matter of trying to go into the fine points sometimes. And but I'm with you. It's very confusing. Now, what is more confusing, and I'm sure that you will get there, and we have talked about this, that is sort of, you know, my struggle every year when I have to fill up those comparative data or institutional data report, and we have, you know, Hispanic people that don't know if they're Hispanic or they're white. Are they Hispanic or are they Asian? Are they Hispanic and Black? Hispanic and others. I just fill up a form for my COVID, you know, sort of booster, and I couldn't find myself either in Hispanic. That was it. You know, then they have a list of races, and I was like, okay, other, I guess. So it is confusing.
Yes, yes. And for folks that don't know, we are in the middle, AAVMC is in the middle of collecting its annual data. And we always get a lot of questions about the demographic data and kind of how do we record people, because I think that the other thing that is really important for folks to understand is Hispanic, Latinx folks can be any race, right? And a lot of times there's not necessarily what that means also can be interpreted very differently from person to person. Francisco, do you want to jump in? How do you identify?
Well, as Carmen says, it's very confusing, but to make it simple, I am Mexicano. Yeah, I am from Mexico, I am Mexicano. That is the way that we identify all over the world. Actually, my family came from my father and mother's side came from Spain, obviously, but they arrived in Mexico in the 16th century. Then they are very, very 100% Mexicano. Yeah, and we have an advantage in Mexico that we don't have to specify the race or whatever. When we all the paperwork say Mexican or Mexicano, and that's it. We don't have to. We have some difference, but these are more cultural, are more the native Mexican people. We have a lot of different origins and a lot of different cultures, and that makes a very rich and very inclusive society. Yeah, and I think that maybe we talk a little bit later, but maybe we have more difference between social classes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That and most of them related to economy, to the income of the people, and also education. That are the more differences that we have, and at the university are working very, very hard right now in trying to be inclusive in all these kind of things. Maybe later we have some time to discuss about a little bit of that. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for answering that question, because I think that it is, as a DEI professional who is trying to keep up with the constant changes and the ways that individuals identify, want to get it right, but it's sometimes a little challenging because you really want to meet individuals where they are. And so each of you have a little bit different kind of framework that you are operating from. And so I think that that's illustrative of, I think, some of the challenges that people find with some of these identifiers. So, you know, Hispanic and Latinx, Latin American students are among the fastest growing student population. And certainly we know in Mexico, UNAM is huge. Like it's a really, really big school, right? And so what do you think your role is and your visibility mean? What do you think that means to Latin American students and Hispanic students? Carmen?
Well, I guess the first thing is sort of, you know, if you take it with a lot of sort of humility and care that, you know, a huge responsibility that you are under the microscope, so to speak. And funnily enough, I am not, or Carlos is not the first Hispanic dean in the US. But the first one, I think it was Gerald Schurich, originally from Chile. But everybody will say, well, but he was German. No, he was not. German last name, but according to the US, it doesn't matter, you know, your origin. If you were born in Latin America, then you are Hispanic. So, you know, big role model, love Gerald Schurich, and very proud. And, you know, in Chile and Mexico and other Latin American countries, you have both surnames. And so Gerald is Schurich Fernandez. So that's the last name of the mother. And so anyways, I am going into different direction now, but I think that you know, when you are sort of the poster person for Hispanic females in the profession, it's a huge responsibility because, you know, there are certain expectations, there are certain stereotypes, and, you know, I guess my role, I feel, is to be sort of welcoming and let people know that if I made it, anybody can make it, and then open doors for others, making it easier for people to get into the profession.
Yeah. So San Risco at your giant university in Mexico City, you know. Yeah, so how do you see your role in visibility and kind of the leadership that you're providing your students?
Well, I think I hope I understood well the question, but I think for us is completely different because we develop in our country, but also let me tell you that this happened like 25, 26 years ago, when the NAFTA agreement was in place, there was a lot of movement of also professionals. And then at that time, I was a young vet at that time. And then we started being worried about that because there were a lot of vets from the United States coming into Mexico. And then we say, well, we need to do something to normalize that. No? And then we start working in that. Then there was a meeting in Mexico in those years. And then we decided to start working in trying to get and meet each other. Yeah, and then that is the way that we learn about us. There is a group that is North America Leadership in Veterinary Medicine. Yeah, and then we meet every year. Since that time, we meet every year in different countries: United States, Mexico, and Canada. Next year will be in Mexico. Carmen was in Canada in the last meeting. Yeah, and it's really a very good meeting because we start to know each other. Then we have more visibility in the United States because we already had it in the other part of the continent, and it is PAMVET. At that time, I am the president of PAMVET, is the Pan American Association on Veterinary Science. Carmen is part of the board of directors, and then this leadership has been developing in a very, I think, in a very important way. Yeah, and that is reflected, that is what I see, is reflected in our school. Yeah, there is no more people that is interested, students and academics and also staff, that they are interested more in what is happening outside Mexico and outside the university, that, as you say, is huge. Right now, the number of students that I have at the vet school is 3,600 students. No, then the things are, I think, are going okay. We need to pursue working more harder. Now is a pleasure for me as a Latin American, yeah, that Canada and United States are part of this association, full associates, and they are interested in going out to the meetings and attend these meetings, and I think that is very good for the continent. Yeah, and then I think that has been reflected in our students also. Yeah.
Carlos.
Yeah, I think so. So I hope that I can be an influencer to Hispanic, Latinx students, that they see me as having a similar background to them here in the United States. And I hope that my influence is, number one, that there are opportunities for them, that there's a pathway for them to enter veterinary school. That's the first thing. And then, of course, to graduate and become a veterinarian. Okay, a little bit different than when I applied 40-some years ago. Secondly, and I think I really feel this, I think this is important because I struggled with this when I was, that they belong in the profession. They can be part of it, because with me personally, there was a time, so, well, I don't know. I always thought that being a veterinarian, at least in the United States, was more for, and I'll say more for white people. What am I doing? So I hope that they see that, look, that you belong in the profession. More importantly is that because of who they are, their experiences, their backgrounds, they will make a positive impact, not only to the veterinary profession, but also to society.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I'm actually going to follow up with that because you kind of alluded to some of those challenges, right? So how have you dealt, each of you dealt with, some of the racial, ethnic kind of challenges for you, Carmen, the additional layer of gender playing a role in your lived experience as well. Carlos, I'm going to stay with you for just a minute there. How do you cope with that?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Okay, sure. Well, I thought about this. So, you know, and we all have our challenges. We all have our stories. So for me, I have coped with this in different ways. Number one, I've never taken it personally. It's not a personal attack. I've always felt that maybe it's a misunderstanding of where the situation is coming from. So I never took it personally, and I always took it as an opportunity to learn. What can I learn from this situation so that I can grow as a person? I've always maintained my my sense of self. I know who I am. Okay. One of the things, and this may be interesting, that I've always been, well, not now, but early on, that I've always been careful with because of these situations, because of these challenges, that I don't fall into the trap of the imposter syndrome and say, you know what, Carlos, you have the intellect, you have the skills, continue to pursue it. Also, in those moments that perhaps the most difficult moments, and not that they were tragic, but they were definitely uncomfortable and difficult. Actually, what I did is I reflected on the many positive contributions that Hispanics, like Latinx, Latinos, have made, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, in literature, our music, our food, the sciences, medicine, sports, just about every segment of society. I says, wow, you know, I would say my people have made this impactful, tremendous contributions. And I've always felt in my moments of doubt that was very comforting for me.
That's great. That's great. Carmen, want to weigh in?
Sure. So I think that, you know, it's different stages in your life. I went to vet school in Chile. So at that point, it was the two challenges of being in the south of Chile, where in veterinary school, the majority of my classmates were German descendants. So it was just a handful of people, what I call with dark hair. And because I will sit at the back of the auditorium and I will see this sea of, you know, blonde hair and here and there, the dark hair. And, but I was also one of the few females in the class. And so the way that I was brought up is that I always, you know, my parents felt that the way that you carry yourself and how hard you work and study and all that is very important. So I know that there are different views on, you know, hard work, and that hard work doesn't work for everybody, that there is a little bit of privilege here and there. And there is no doubt that, you know, I did have situations where I did have the privilege of, we were not rich, we were not poor, but my parents were sort of well positioned within, my dad within the intellectual world, my mom was a nurse, and we own our house, you know, like when you start looking at all the different things that will constitute privilege. I think that when I was an exchange student, a teenager, an exchange student in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that was the first time that it was like, oh, I'm really different. But I was with a very loving family, still maintaining contact after all these years. And so the way that I have faced, you know, challenges, and is interesting that you're asking, because our students had a session yesterday or day before yesterday. Boys had a session and they asked a similar question. And my response was that there is a primitive way of responding to a challenging situation. You know, you flight or you fight. And I tend to flight. You don't want me to fight, believe me, because when you talk about, a fiery, Latina woman, yes, you don't want to see that side of me. So I tend to ignore it and walk away. And I see Paco smiling because he and I have worked together with PAMVET in very sort of tough situations. We get along wonderfully, and we have faced some, really tough situations. And he knows that, I would not fight. I will speak my mind, but I will not fight. And if something is wrong, and my dad would say, just have pity on them. They're ignorant. And so that's the way, they don't know better. So, just walk away. And that, I think, has saved me from some embarrassment.
Oh, I get it. I am a Southern U.S. woman. We would say, bless their hearts.
I know, you taught me to bless your heart. I use it so often.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah, we did have a discussion about the use of bless your heart. So I do use it.
Francisco.
Well, I want to start this part saying that what Carlos says was beautiful. Congratulations. Yeah. And also, let me tell you that I learned a lot from Carmen. And in the last few years, she's quite a woman, and the way that she behaves in bad situation is wonderful. Is wonderful also. But I'm going to tell you two experience that I have, because in Mexico it's difficult to have a discrimination because of the color of your skin or whatever. But I have a discrimination for the color of my skin in the United States. I went to in a visit when I finished the bachelor degree. Then I spent some time in Ohio, and then I was in a Latino area, and then Saturday night in a dancing place, todo eso, I really feel discriminated from all these people, And then, well, that was an experience. I was very young, and I learned a lot of the at that time was right to use the word Chicano. I think there is not anymore, but with the Chicano group of people, and I enjoy it. At the very end of my stay with that group, they recognize me. I recognize them. It's a very, very nice people, working people. And they hope that they also know how to party, and then, and at the very end, I really had a very good time with them. And the second time was also, that it was during my PhD degree, that somebody called me Mexican, but you know how you perceive one day the way that they called you, and then, but it's like a fairy tale, no? It has a very good ending also. We finished being a very close friends we help each other during the last time during my PhD. Then I think is everything that goes when you know how to deal with these things and take advantage of this experience. I think that is the good part of having experience. It's going to be very boring not to have nothing happen to you. That would be a very boring life, no?
That's a very positive way of looking at it, and I appreciate that. So, Francisco, I'm going to stay with you for a minute. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges to diversity in veterinary medicine in general? What do you see are big challenges?
Well, the thing is trying to understand in the recent time what is happening. Then these differences become completely different of the education that we have. But I think that you have to be very open-minded, and trying to understand what is the differences, what are the diversity that we need in our society, and how we have to recognize them. It's only not the race, it's also sex, it's also gender, it's all these kind of things. And I am think that is that when things that happened all over the world. It was very, very hard in the 2018, 19. In Mexico, we have a lot of the protests, a lot of these kind of things. And I think that was because of feminism, yeah. And I think ladies are right. There are very different ways to express that they are not happy, yeah. And I am not want to get in this question of that. There are ways that, but in essential, they are right. They have been for many, many, many years, and I can say that because I have only aunts. I don't have uncles. I have only sisters. I don't have brothers. Then I understand them very, very well. Let me tell you that I was responsible for everything at home. Yeah, if something was wrong, was Francisco, the one that did it wrong. Yeah, but anyway, I think I am very feminist in this way, but I think that we have to be very supportive with especially with at the vet school, the students come into a very, very young. They come in around 20 years old. And then they are having all these kind of worries. They have to deal with them. We have to improve a lot our psychological service. I have to hire more psychologists. And then there is something that we have to deal with. It's going to take some time. That has to go, and then it's a change. It's a change that is needed in our society, and I think that we have to learn every day and how to deal and how to solve these kind of problems. All problems have solutions. You know?
Yes, they do. It may not come easy, but they all do have solutions. And I think you're right. We do see these. I mean, globally, we see these movements, where groups kind of, they get sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? I mean, we're seeing that with women and students in Iran right now, right? And so, so I think that it is something that we, it's a collective struggle, right? Carlos, what do you see are the big challenges?
Well, I think that Francisco is on point, but to me, in addition to that, I think we need to continue to have a discussion, expand the discussion. Why does diversity matter? And what is its value? I still feel that there's some individuals that just don't quite understand that. And I think it's an opportunity for us to educate them. And it goes beyond the moral belief that is the right thing to do. And Lisa, you in your book, you had a chapter on why it matters. Why is it? What's the value? And to me, one of the points that I always bring out when I have this discussion is why not? Why not tap into this community, into this group of, and this is all underrepresented, not just Hispanics or Latino, because we are stretching the boundaries of where the future veterinarians are going to come from. And these individuals, as I said earlier, because of their experiences, their cultural differences, their background, I go back that they will have a positive influence in the profession. And as you said, there's other factors. It's the business sense, because in the case of the Latinos, the population is growing. So that means that there's going to be more clients. And as you said in your book, just like in human medicine, the relationship within the client doctor relationship, there's an affinity if that client relates to you. So I think that's important. And all the other attributes. The other area that I think we need to continue to work on, that we're getting better, but we need to continue to work, is on the inclusiveness side. I think that we get over the hurdle of the diversity, okay, but are we being inclusive in our colleges of veterinary medicine to all? And I think that that continues to be, we're doing better. I think all of us are working to try to make it better, but I still feel that there is some room for improvement in that particular area of inclusiveness.
Yeah, yeah. Whenever someone tells me, why does it matter and the dogs don't care, and I tell people all the time, and people have heard me even say it on the podcast, that when my cute little dog Barkley is able to take himself to Delray Animal Hospital with his own credit card,
Yes.
then maybe it will matter less.
Yes.
But he is still really reliant on me for his day-to-day life. So yeah, Carmen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with both, Paco and Carlos, what they have said. I have, just a few things to add. One is that I think that one of the big risks is polarization and the different groups, recognizing that the different groups have their own struggles. Mm-hmm. In the African American community, in the Hispanic community, and Francisco mentioned this, colorism is big. Are you darker? Are you light skin? Are you medium skin? All these, skin tones and all that, socioeconomic status, like where are you in this totem pole? So I think that we need to learn somehow to work together and be a community. And you are going to talk to the New York Veterinary Society soon on the value of allyship. We shouldn't forget that there are a lot of white people that they want to help. Yeah. They want to know, what can we do? How can we help? What are the opportunities out there to help and have an influence? And to me, one of the big risks is that, we go to sort of elementary school, middle school, high school, college, trying to tell people about veterinary medicine so that they will see a veterinarian. And we may get these students very excited about pursuing a career in veterinary medicine, but guess what? How do they access a veterinary clinic to have a mentor? The first hurdle is to go and talk to the receptionist that is going to send them away. So how do we get, clinics to open their doors and have a more accessible way for minorities of all types to go and say, hey, I would like to volunteer here? Because then in veterinary school, what do we do in our admissions process? We call it holistic, but then we are looking at how many hours of pre-veterinary medicine experience do you have? And if you didn't have access to a veterinarian, how are you going to get there? So I think that leveraging into the people that want to help and the different communities being more open to be inclusive, I think is a big deal. And then, that one of the big things that we have not talked about is that in general, and I know that this is going to sound awful, but in top of colorism and social classes, in general, in Latin American societies, sexual orientation, sexual identity is a big thing. We are not tolerant. And then I hate that word because there is nothing to tolerate. But we, that is a big thing where people are still afraid to come out and be who they were born to be. So all of those things, I can go on and on, but we're running out of time.
No, those are really important things, and it gets at that those intersectional issues that I think Francisco also kind of alluded to earlier around, class and the impact of poverty on accessibility, yeah, then you have, you know, gender identity and queer identities, and kind of how do communities respond and react, and you can be even in homogenous, fairly homogenous kind of communities and still feel excluded, right? Yeah, or just tolerated, right? Francisco, yeah. Did you have anything else to add, Francisco?
No. The word tolerated, I was thinking what Carmen says, tolerated. Why we have to tolerate?
Yeah. Yeah, you want to be inclusive. So, Francisco, I actually have a very specific question for you. And we were chatting about this before the start of the show, and that is, so UNAM has been accredited by the COE now for what, 11 years, you said. And, you know, I remember I was working on my doctorate at the time and working on accreditation issues, and oh my, there was a lot of chatter about UNAM, and, you know, oh my goodness, you know, these graduates of UNAM are going to come to the US and take all of, you know, the veterinary jobs. Of course, now we're talking about a shortage. So, you know, like there's,
Yeah.
like, it goes like this. But, you know, I guess my question for you is how, and each of you have talked a little bit about how you cope with these things, but how did you really kind of cope with, I guess that the resistance? I mean, don't think it was it wasn't a COE thing, but it was what COE represented, right? And so how did you deal with the rhetoric, those things? Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me start a little bit earlier than that.
Sure.
Yeah. This talking. I was talking about the NAPTAT thing, and then we decided, okay, we don't need to fight. We better go and see and fulfill all the requirements. And that is what we start doing. It took us 10 years to prepare the vet school to be ready to be accredited. Yeah, and a lot of money. Yeah, you know what all these requirements means. Now, then we did all that it has to be done. We think we did it okay. Then we usually take one visit and a full visit. We have 2 visits and almost a year to have the decision, because all what happened in the radio, in the news, in everywhere. Yeah. And then I remember very well one celebration of ABMC and in Chicago. I think that was the 100th celebration. Yeah, and then they invite me in the House of Delegates to give a little 3-minute speech. No? And I remember very well I said, we are not trying to get the accreditation to export vets to the United States. What we are pursuing is quality and excellence, you know? And that was right. Yeah, at that time, we didn't have the equivalent of the COE. We start working, then these things of accreditation become in Latin American, and they have actually the same design that we did create in Mexico. And we took a lot of things from the COE to establish it in Mexico. Yeah? And then at the things, we got the accreditation, and they were waiting for all this bunch of Mexican vets going into the United States, and nothing changed. We start having the same applications that they have to take the NAPLE and these kind of things, to be able to have a license in the United States. The numbers didn't vary too much. It still is today. It has been a little bit raised by the demand that is needed now in the United States and Canada, but usually is 1 to 2% the number of vets from each class then migrate to United States that they're applying for a license. Then it hasn't been any change. Right now we are having people trying to promote, ask those for space to promote, to be hired, to go to work into United States or Canada. And what I have been telling these people is that we still believe in quality and excellence, and that is the way that we want to be in as a accredited school. And also, as you know, there is no tuition or fee at the UNAM. No, Then the education is paid by the Mexican society. Yeah. Then we are very interested that the vets and the good vets remain in Mexico. Yeah, serving Mexican people. Yeah, there is the general idea. In conclusion, it was let's say, interesting time. It was very, you have a lot of stress. Any accreditation, we have a follow-up of the accreditation in Mexico at the third year of the accredited to check if we are fulfilling all the suggestions and all the recommendation that they did. Yeah, and it's a follow-up. Yeah, but anyway, this is stressful. But anyway, I feel that we did it okay, and we have a very supportive people in the COE, in AVMA, in AAVMC, very, very supportive people. You know, and let me tell you, I'm going to take advantage now to thank all these people, because we have learned a lot from them, and I think people from the United States and Canada from this organization have also learned the way that we do things here in Mexico and also in Latin America. Then I think I feel very, very, very well, very, how do you say, successful in all these adventures that we had. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I am absolutely delighted that you all are a part of AAVMC, and yeah, it was an interesting time. There was a lot happening with accreditation. For me, as someone interested in accreditation, it was really great for my dissertation. So I'm really sorry that you went through that, but it was great for my dissertation. But okay. So as we begin to wrap the show, I'm very curious for each of you. I guess this is probably my last question, and that is, what do you see are kind of those big opportunities? But really, what I want to know is, what words of wisdom can you share with students from shared or similar backgrounds that also apply certainly to all students, right? Because everybody's going to be tuning in, but really, what words of wisdom might you share? Carmen, we're going to start with you, because Carmen has given me many, many words of wisdom over our
I don't know about that, but thank you for saying that. So, well, I will start with, you made a comment that all the pushback for UNAM to get accredited was at the same time when there were all discussions that there were too many veterinarians. And at that time, I was in a national meeting where somebody stood up and said, look at the demographics. That it's going to be a time when whites are going to be a minority, and Hispanics, Latinos are reproducing like rabbits, and they will be all over the place, and they do not use veterinary services. So, we don't need more veterinarians, and look where we are now. So, just because, I am not going to deny the value of seeing people that look like you, speak like you, and have them as a role model. But when you don't have them, I think that you just have to find the role models in willing people that want to mentor you. And my mentors have been white men. One of them is Dr. Larry Hyder, that was also your boss. He was the person that introduced us, and he was my dean at Atlantic Vet College. I mean, how does he look like me? Excellent mentor. Texas A&M, John Chaddock, a pathologist, also a white man. And so I can go on and on, then a female, Shirley Johnston at Western University, tall white lady. And so, I think that you just have to look for the role models and then know that nobody's perfect, and look away for the things that are not, quite similar to your background, or maybe they will say something that it was not meant to be hurtful, and then they don't know any better, you just move on. So that would be my recommendation, that during this time when we are not numerous, just look for the role models across, different races, different type of socioeconomic status, different gender identifications and so on, and just be resilient. That resiliency is just so valuable.
For that. Thank you for that. Francisco, words of wisdom for those 3,000 students you have. And I'm sure you know them all by name.
Mostly. And it's 3,600.
Oh.
3,600.
Oh, okay. Pushing 4,000. Okay.
Okay. Well, I will tell them that they take advantage of the opportunities. Then sometimes the opportunities come only once in your lifetime, and then you have to be awake and you have to be waiting for those opportunities and take advantage when you see them. Another thing is, that I will say is, don't worry too much about what you are. Be yourself. Don't have to worry. Yeah, things you have to learn to accept you as you are, and that's it. And the third one is, you always remember to be grateful to the people that help you, to your mentors and the institutions. I really believe in institutions, and I think that we have to be grateful when we get good things from institutions, and especially from people. And I have a lot of people that I would like to thank during all my years at veterinary medicine, nationally and internationally. Yeah, it's a when you have the opportunity to travel and the opportunity to meet people outside of your country, that is quite an experience that I will recommend trying to do it. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Carlos, what you got?
Well, I would, I go back to the old cliche, to follow your dreams. I think I like the word that was used, to be resilient, to maintain your strong sense of self. And I think, I agree wholeheartedly with Carmen that to look for mentors, advisors that may not look like you. Because for me personally, there were a lot of white males that not only mentored me, but opened the door, helped open the door. So I think that would be my message. And I keep going back that there's a place for you in this profession, and that you belong.
Oh, that's beautiful too. And yes, shout out to Dr. Larry Hyder and the late, great Dr. Lester Crawford, who is responsible, both of those are responsible for me being in vet med and have had a major impact on my life, and neither one of them look like me, right? And so in any way, but yes, there are really great allies out there who can be your champions, your sponsors, your mentors. So wonderful, wonderful guidance. I'd just like to take an opportunity to thank each of you for agreeing to be on the show. I'm so glad that we finally had an opportunity to have this conversation. It means a lot to me personally. I'm quite fond of each of you, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Lisa.
Thank you for having us.
Sure. So this has been another episode of AAVMC's Diversity and Inclusion on Air. To my guests, Dean Risco, Dean Suarez, and Dean Fuentealba. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcast app, and we will be migrating our Facebook content to the main AAVMC Facebook page beginning in November. So if you have not liked the Facebook page, the AAVMC's general Facebook page, please go and do that right now, and you will soon find the content that the podcast page used to have. So be sure to do that. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.